Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We're talking NFL draft today. We've got another show in our continuing coverage of NFL draft prospects. We've reached the linebacker, off-the-ball linebacker in a 3-4 setting. So we're talking about the two middle guys usually in a defense. And Seahawks went out and did some work in free agency. When we started free agency, Keith, after the season, the cupboards were bare for the Seahawks, but they did address those positions, came away looking a little stronger, and now we go into the draft with a couple guys on the roster, but doesn't preclude us from making moves in this draft to bring in a young guy as well. Welcome in. How you doing?
Doing good. You're like, ooh, the cupboards were bare. They were bare, and I'm not sure I'm not sure how unbare they are at the moment. I'm not as high on the two guys they brought in. They have guys. That's important. They do have guys. Whereas before they didn't. But
it's about shifting priorities, though. You know, we talked about it. We've pined for it for a couple of seasons now. We thought we were spending too much money on Bobby Wagner, diminishing Bobby Wagner as far as being a coverage linebacker, and we talked about Jordan Brooks and how much money he was going to make in the offseason. We talked about the safeties and what we needed to do there. We needed to shift resources into the offensive and defensive lines. We appear to have done that as far as the defensive line is concerned. And then we have, that means that you're going to have to spend less at the position. You're going to have to get some guys that are kind of just journeyman level players. And maybe that works out okay in a Mike Macdonald defense. I don't know yet. Or maybe, they've got linebackers that are number one priority in the draft.
Well, if you look at what Mike Macdonald had on in Baltimore, and they traded for and re-signed big money Roquan Smith in their middle, and they had drafted Patrick Queen. They had two good high money, like it was an important part of that defense. And then you look at Seattle's roster and you go, yeah, it's not the same. So I don't know. I think that this is a likely spot that they address early in this draft, because I think they need more athleticism. They need more dynamic athletes at the position.
I will say this, though. These are more dynamic athletes than what we had. Terrell Dodson's going to have the green dot on his helmet. He's going to be calling the plays at the middle linebacker spot. Jerome Baker's going to be more of the weak side guy, but they'll work in tandem. Both guys, though, are pretty decent in coverage. One of the top 20 linebackers in the league as far as their coverage grades are concerned. Better than what we had. That shows kind of the importance and the roles that those guys will take on in this defense, I think. Bringing two guys in like that.
One of the big problems they had last year was that Wagner's he didn't have anything left as far as his ability to run, and so he was beating coverage regularly, and that was never Brooks's strength. He was a guy that's great coming forward and sideline to sideline, but dropping back was never his what he was good at, even though he had the athleticism to be better than what we ever saw. So yeah, they should be better in pass defense. But you got to get up to the line of scrimmage and make some plays against the run. The teams are just going to run on you all day. And I'm not sure they have that. I think they need to get that. Yeah,
these are sideline to sideline capable guys, but I'm not sure if they're filling holes as good as Bob. Of course, nobody did.
Nobody fills holes like Bobby Wagner.
Bobby and Brooks, but now they've got some protection with Hankins up there. Maybe it's better for them. You combine that with Julian Love and Rashawn Jenkins and Kevon Wallace, Jarek Reed. They've got a better middle of the field defense, I think, this year, at least in coverage. I think they're going to be better. And so you combine that with the pass rush, And this team could have some success on the defensive side, just on player personnel, improvements at certain spots and in certain things that they will do well. Now, as far as the scheme is concerned, the way they're coached, all that kind of stuff, we're hoping that brings out more in these players and allows them to be in a position to be successful, but we shall see. So let's talk about linebackers in the draft, Keith. It's not particularly top heavy. It's not particularly great on depth. So if you're going to get a guy and you're expecting a guy to come out of the draft as being a starter, you're going to be pressed in this draft to do that. A 3 down every day linebacker starter, there's probably 2 or 3 in this draft that you're going to get starting day one. There are others. There's some depth there. You can draft into the 4th, 5th round, and some guys that you can develop. But if you want somebody to come in and immediately impact or be some sort of a rotation piece, usually middle linebacker is not a player that you're going to rotate a lot. Those guys are going to be on the field, and then they're not. You're going to switch into nickel and dime coverage and so forth. One of those guys can come out. So talk to me about how you feel about the class overall, and where do you want to start?
Well, I like the class overall. I think maybe a little more than you do based on that description, but I would agree it's not top heavy. I don't see a single first round linebacker here. I see a bunch of guys that are going to be rounds 2 and 3, and it's about just pick your flavor. I have a particular flavor that I like in this, and that's going to be Peyton Wilson.
Interesting.
6'4", but he runs a 4.43, and he's a guy that I think you can get mid round 2. And he's got some injury concerns and some stuff in the past, but he's probably maybe he's the fastest of the group, and I like linebacker speed. But he's got the size, the speed, the agility. He's a guy that's going to be all over the field for you if he stays healthy. So.
Yeah. Here's a guy that's got the speed and the length and the movement and kind of the player intelligence you want at the position. But the physicality, I think, is going to need to come for this kid. Now, you can't teach speed. If you're a team and your primary objective is to add speed to your defense, he's got to be high on your list for sure, because this guy's going to have the agility, sideline to sideline. He diagnoses well. But can he hold up to the rigors of the NFL? Has he got a body type that's going to be like Jamal Adams, and he's going to break down on you? You need to be careful about what you're expecting him to do from day one.
That is the concern, is that he is a guy that has an injury history, but high ceiling talent, just really high ceiling talent. So
he's only 233 pounds. I mean, if he was 243 and had that speed, I would be like, whoa, that guy's off the charts.
Yeah, but look at all the linebackers. Where's a guy that's 243 here?
Well, I think there are some guys. You take not guys at the top, but there are true kind of middle linebackers, maybe better fits in a 4-3. Those guys, you want your 3-4 linebackers to be a little bit more athletic, I think, in general. And I think you saw that in the way they approached free agency. And they may be looking for the same guys. That's why a guy like Junior Colson comes to mind. Guy from Michigan, they're familiar with him. Mike McDonald coached him one season there, and their special teams coordinator knows him, really well, Harbaugh. And a guy like that could definitely be in play, especially if they drop back, pick up additional picks, and he's sitting there. Maybe they picked up a second round pick in the 50s somewhere, and he's sitting there. He could definitely be a candidate that I think that they would look at to bring onto this team. I think he's got the size and the speed and the length to be able to add a little bit of weight. He comes in at 238, 240. I think you could get him up to 245 or so, and he'd be completely fine, hold up into the rigors of the NFL. I think that he's smart, makes an immediate impact for whatever team, drafts him. He's one of my favorite players in the draft, and he's from Michigan, and they've got kind of that inside information there. So to me, it makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense. The 4.58,
Not
is going
super
to drop.
fast, but it's typical.
But it's going to drop him down because I think people were expecting him to be faster. He at one point was thought of as, this is the, the top middle linebacker in the draft, and now he's not thought of that way because he doesn't have that, that elite speed, that people were kind of expecting. If you want that, I think Edgerrin Cooper, from Texas A&M is probably your guy.
I was just going to say, there's not a lot of elite speed in this draft at this spot.
And that's one of those things that you go back, if you go back in time to when Bobby Wagner was coming out, like, he was a small school guy, but why did he go in the second round? Because he had elite speed at his size.
4.47.
Yeah. I thought he was faster than that, but
I mean, he could have been a 4.43 guy, but nonetheless in the 4.4s. And you're right. And it shouldn't have shocked anybody. In fact, with more information and the more scouting that we do today, Bobby Wagner probably is closer to a first round guy, even though he went to Utah. That's still a Pac-12 school, now a Pac-2.
Well, it wasn't even Utah. It was like Southern Utah. It was
I think it was Utah or Utah State, one of those two, right?
Yeah, it was. But Utah wasn't Pac-12 then. They were a small school. They were tiny.
So, but you're right about Edgerrin Cooper, though. He's probably everyone's number one linebacker. But again, he's only 230 pounds, 232, I think, at the combine. 6'2", but runs that 4.51 40. You could probably squeeze him down a little bit if you wanted to and get him into the 4.4s. But he's got that high motor, elite quickness, sideline to sideline kind of a player. Good diagnoser. Played with Texas A&M, so nice school. He's got a lot of experience. He kind of comes in ready to go, but he's just as undersized as anybody else. As far as manning the middle in the NFL, I don't think he's going to be a 4.3 guy. He's going to be a 3.4 guy for sure.
Mm-hmm. It seems like there's as middle linebacker in a 3.4. There's two guys. One of them you tend to want to be a little bigger, a little more of a thumper. And the other one tends to be a little smaller and a little more rangy. And you need that diversity. There's a lot of the smaller, little more rangy guys in this draft and not the bigger thumper guys.
So weak side guys typically are kind of like that.
Yeah. But they're both guys in the middle. And so, you kind of go down the list. I'm like, who's your thumper? Who's your guy that's going to come up and just drill people and that kind of stuff? And the best of the group might be Tommy Eichenberg. He's 6'2", only 233 as far as that, but you look at his frame.
He's bulked up a little bit, so he's like 241 or something like that right now.
You look at his frame, and he's 241, 245. He can get there easy and not lose the athleticism. But he's a 4.68 guy. He's not fast, but man, he can come up into a hole and kill a running back. And that's what he's going to be good at. He's going to be a run defender. He
could definitely be a 4.3 middle linebacker to me. That's what that looks like. But also the 3.4 stuff, you've got two linebackers, you're right. But if you were running that old school 4.3, he would be an old school 4.3 linebacker to me.
Yeah. So in Seattle, we're kind of, we're not used to this, but typically your middle linebacker in your 4.3 is the one that comes off the field. In the nickel. And in Seattle, it was Bobby Wagner. And he was so fast and so athletic that they left him on, and they pulled one of the other, they pulled their strong side guy out. But typically, that's who it is. And that's who Eichenberg is. He's that guy that would come off in the nickel. If he was in a 4.3 and a 3.4, they need a guy that can come up and plug holes and do the stuff that Bobby Wagner used to do against the run game. And he's that guy. I mean, he's not as good dropping back and all of those kind of things, but he's going to be the guy that comes off the field when you go to the nickel. You're running, a 3.3 up front. And so, okay, I'm okay with that. You need guys like that. You need guys that can come up and do that job and really fill those gaps and punish running backs, and I think he's that guy. He's also a guy that you can take.
So there's a couple of guys I wanted.
Easy.
There's a couple of guys that are going to be later that I'd like to talk about. One is Michael Barrett, just because of the obvious connection at Michigan, 233 pounds, 5'11", a little undersized as far as height is concerned, but ran a 4.50 40. He's rangy and instinctive. He's going to be a special teams guy. I'll talk about special team stuff, here for a little while, probably to the end of the segment, because this is kind of the range in the draft where you kind of look for that. And that connection with Michigan is there. And the guy from Washington, Ulu Foshio, 236 pounds, 6'0", height-wise, 4.56 40, good athleticism and all that stuff. And then Trice Knight from UTEP, 233 pounds, 6 foot. We're in a 4.63 40, but that's not really what they depend on, that straight line speed. He's kind of, great in space, small space and so forth, quickness and so forth. They had a top 30 visit with him, Trice Knight. He visited Seattle. So beyond the combine visits, beyond the Senior Bowl stuff, he came to Seattle on that one of those 30 visits. So that's a name to kind of pay attention to. And he's going to be in the late 5th, 6th round range for a guy, and taking a linebacker in that range is about where I think I see them selecting a linebacker. Now, they could go out and choose Colson or something and surprise me in the top of the 2nd round or whatever, but I see the value shifting in the way that they approach this, and I think they can get the guy that they really want and develop. Since they've got some time now, they've got a couple other players that are going to start on the roster. Bring a guy in that you could work into a role in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that those later round guys are kind of where I expect it, unless they drop back a couple times and end up with an extra 3rd round pick. I could see them going in that range. If you're looking in the 4th, maybe the 5th, I think you got to look at Tyron Hopper, 6'2", 250. Sorry, 6'2", 231 with a 4.50. My brain is connecting numbers here. But he's a 4.50. I mean, that's pretty quick, especially for this draft. 232 is a little light, but this is a guy that will be good in coverage. Fluid hips, long arms.
I've got him down as being only 221 pounds. Is that correct?
I've got him at 231.
Oh, okay.
And I hope that's not.
Because I was thinking, well, maybe the guy is a strong safety. So one of the players I was going to talk about in this draft, Keith, and every year there's a player that has a name that we bring up that we like. We like him only because he's got like some sort of weird, crazy name. And this guy has like a name that I just can't get over. Every time I see it, I giggle a little bit. His name is Steel Chambers.
Oh yeah.
And I just, every time I think about
Ohio State.
Yeah. Whatever you want to think about when you think about that name, it's funny to me.
Well, it's like, what's the if you were going to, go into Madden and create the ultimate fullback, Max Strong would come as the name, right? And we all remember that from Seattle history, but and that's part of we love these names. Steel Chambers, yeah, talking about being a lockdown guy, picking up those running backs coming out. Nope, yep. He's in the steel chamber. You're not getting him out. Right.
That's funny.
Love the name. Not sure of him as a prospect.
I'm not either.
At 226 pounds and only running, a 4.58. But damn, that's a name.
That's funny. Yeah. So, and there's just a whole bunch of other guys. I mean, John Trey Hunter from Georgia State, 6'2", 240 pounds, is a guy that I kind of like in the later rounds, that you can pick up. Michael Barrett, I mentioned him, I think from Michigan, I had written
Yeah.
down.
Michael Barrett's a guy that I look at that and I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Just his combination of size and speed and then the Michigan connection. It's like,
yeah.
and you're taking a guy this late, you're looking at a guy that's going to make an impact on special teams this first year, because they've got the two guys they just signed. And
Well, and I'll
so,
tell you something too. The Michigan just had its pro day, and there were two coaches from the Seahawks there. One was the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb. The other one was the linebackers coach.
mhm.
And so I think, you're taking a look at Colson for sure, right? But you're also looking at Barrett as a player that I think that you could get later and develop and be a special teams guy, and the coaches know him. So to me, that's one of the most likely picks in the draft. I think in like the 5th, 6th round is a guy that you can come in and develop and be on special teams and just be a good pro.
Yeah, it's a good match between player and team, in terms of what they want, what they're looking for, who they know really well, um, and draft Aaron and value in terms of where they pick him in the draft. It's such an easy couple of dots to connect that I'm sure it won't happen.
Yeah, and Pro Football Focus has him ranked at 153, but you go out and look at some other big boards, and he's in the 220 range, and so I don't know what the disconnect is there, but he's a good linebacker. He made the Pro Football Focus as the 25th overall linebacker out of 776 prospects in 2023, and so he's a guy with some upside that I would be interested in looking at. How about you, Keith? What are some guys that fit what they want, and you wouldn't mind seeing them bring on to develop?
Well, we talked about a bunch of them already.
I mean, I like Tommy Eichenberg. I mean, Tommy Eichenberg to me is a great 3rd or 4th round prospect. He's one of the better tacklers in this draft, and a guy that is really just solid. I think he had a better 2022 than he had a 2023. I think he fell off a little bit, had some injury stuff, but he played really well in 2022. And I think he's a guy that's going to be undervalued a little bit, because I think he might be a one-trick pony. You're going to have to see how he does dropping back into coverage and so forth, but really solid gap filler, and a guy that can come in and tackle, and just physical guy. And they talked about identity on the defense. They want to be physical. They want to be strong. They want to be sure tacklers and so forth. And you heard that from Pete Carroll for a while, and that didn't translate onto the field the last 4 or 5 years. I think Mike McDonald's going to demand that they are that way. And so a guy like Tommy Eichenberg to me fits that mold. So I would pay attention to his name in the draft.
Have we talked about JD Bertrand?
No,
we start throwing names
the
out
kid
here
from Notre Dame.
Yeah, the names come flying out so quickly on these shows that sometimes I lose track of who we've talked about and who we haven't. I mean, he's 6'1", 235, 4'6", so not the fastest guy, but he's got real nice length, good flexibility, can blitz around the edge, can blitz up the middle. There's He's a sideline to sideline pursuer in terms of in the run game. I like his game. I think it translates well into the NFL, even though he's not that speed demon that I would want, because that's what I love seeing linebackers with speed. 4.61's not going to do that for you, but this combination of size and ability, I think, is someone you can look at, and he's going to be a 5th round pick, somewhere in that range. So I think that's a guy that I like as a fit for Seattle. It's hard to find. I think because they're running the 3-4 and because they need guys that are a little bigger, this just isn't that draft, right? Colston and Eichenberg and those are the guys that you're looking at to be those.
Well, and the other guys just have deficiencies. I mean, either they're a little short, they're not long, they lack the weight, below average, athletes. Doesn't mean they're not going to be good pros. You got to go beyond kind of some of those measurables. You got to look at pre-snap recognition and communication. Are they vocal? Are they physical? Do they have good fundamentals? Do they square their shoulders, when they're tackling, all that kind of stuff? Do they find the ball carrier? So measurables only tell a little bit of the story. And some of these guys are good football players. And that's what I think the Seahawks are going to be looking for. Like the JD Bertrand thing is a perfect example of that. Tough, smart, competitive prospect, but undersized. He's just a little undersized, but you can have a guy like that on your roster, especially in the middle of the defense, a guy that can, just be good fundamentally for you, good communicator, kind of a leadership guy. And you have him out a little bit of weight. You're not going to be able to do anything about him, as far as the length, but you help him out by having those guys up front, like Jonathan Hankins, who, he's not having to swim through a whole bunch of blocks to get to a ball carrier or to a receiver. And so you can get guys like that. There's guys like that all the way through, round 5, I think, in this draft that, pick one, essentially. Cedric Gray is another example of that. 6'2", 235, little undersized, little, doesn't have the length, but you go take a look at him in college, you look at the film, which is what you want to be able to do. And he's a guy that can play, he's instinctive, and he commands his defense. He's a team captain. So there's a lot of guys like that.
So he was a guy that played up in the 260s at college.
Really?
In college.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Bruce Feldman had him listed at 6'3", 270. And then he comes in at the combine at 6'2", 234. And you're like,
oh, wow.
Okay, that's weird. But so he's a guy that I'm like, I don't know what to think about him. Like, is he going to be a bigger guy that's a thumper and he lost a bunch of weight trying to be more explosive? I don't know. But so he's kind of an enigma to me as of right now. If you're looking for the guys like Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State, we're going to have a lot of Penn State guys. He's 6'1", 241. But 4'5", 40, he's fast enough. He's got good instincts, good at tackling in the open field. I think, if you're going to match him up one-on-one against some of the more athletic running backs in the league, in coverage, he might struggle a little bit because that's not really who he is in coverage. But he's a guy that comes upfield and just kills people in holes. And
another guy that does that is Marist Liafoa from Notre Dame, one of the most physical linebackers in the draft. Powerful downhill kind of linebacker, good in zone coverage, decent, not great, but he plays like he's got some bad intentions, And so you want guys like that I can't even emphasize that enough. We have lacked that for so long. People forget like what it was like to have a really good defense in 2012, 13, 14, where we, Cam Chancellor was the enforcer and you had his lieutenants, and we needed that defense again. I'm so excited about this Mike McDonald situation because that's what he brought to the Ravens. And the Ravens have kind of had that attitude. That's kind of been their mantra for a long time. But Mike McDonald kind of made that happen the last couple of years there. And I think that we're going to end up attracting players to this team that are going to be like that. And so a guy like the kid from Notre Dame that I just mentioned is kind of like that. And Eichenberg, the same sort of player, old school throwback. You don't have those old school throwback players at every position, but just at certain spots, you kind of want that at your middle linebacker, at least one of those guys at your down and dirty, strong safety. You want those guys to kind of be enforcers a little bit, not play dirty, but play physical and hard and let you know that you were just tackled.
So I don't think we can end this show without talking about the person with the Hall of Fame name, um, in Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Coming out of Clemson.
I don't know how I feel about him.
I don't feel a lot about him as a Seattle player, simply because 228, pretty small, 4.6 or 460, not particularly fast. 6'0", not particularly long. Just
Mhm.
smart. He knows football. You can tell he has a dad who played in the NFL for a long time. He knows football. He's smart. He's instinctive. Um,
He's a
is
guy that can
good
do
in
it all, Keith. Really. I mean,
he can.
we probably undersell this kid, and we just did by really not even mentioning him. But he's everyone consensus top 100 player in this draft, even at
Yeah.
6',
I think he's
228 pounds.
I think he's a back of the second, very early of the third kind of player. He's just undersized, and he's not going to overwhelm
And he's
anyone
not terribly
physically.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, he ran
Undersized,
what, a
and
4.78 40, something like that.
I have him at
But
4.60.
you look at his stats. He's got 87 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 5 pass defenses, 2 forced fumbles. That's just 2023. So he takes a lot of snaps. He never comes off the field. He kind of leads his team. He went to Clemson, good program there. He had very consistent years in 2022 and 2023 as well. 2022 he had 92 tackles, 13.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 6 passes broken up, an interception returned for a touchdown. Is just kind of a do-it-all player, a good football player. So you kind of discount a little bit the speed, which I hesitate on, because if you're going to spend a second or a third round pick on a player with that 4.78 speed, either you figure that doesn't matter because of the skill set he brings, or that's an incorrect reflection of his true agility and speed, and he's more of like a 4.6 guy. Then I think you take that player, but I'm just not sure about him.
He's a hard guy to peg down because the athletic traits aren't there, but the tape is really good. Like I said, he plays like a guy who knows football better than the people around him.
Mm-hmm.
He just knows the intricacies of the game and scheme and angles and everything better than the people around him. He's clearly been watching.
His dad was dad played 12 seasons in the NFL. So
yeah, he's clearly a guy who's been watching tape with his dad for a very long time, and has that pro tape study kind of mentality. You just see it in his tape. He just gets way more out of his athletic traits than other people do. But how does that translate into the NFL if he doesn't have the physical traits? I don't know. But I thought we would be remiss if we got out of the show without mentioning him.
Well, like I said earlier, certain players are just good football players and don't necessarily have the athletic traits that you look for at certain positions. And sometimes you just got to trust the film. You have to trust the coaches that you have relationships with. You have to trust your area scouts, all that kind of stuff. Because you look at his 3-cone, it's the 49th percentile. You look at his bench press. He's not very strong, benched 21 times. His short shuttle was piss poor. He's got 31.5-inch arms. He just doesn't have a lot going for him. He's only got 9.25-inch hands. He's just a smaller kind of a player, 6 foot, undersized at 228. It's like, do you have him, move into a strong safety kind of a box guy?
He's not fast enough for that.
So he can't cover. What you're saying is he can't even cover tight ends?
Can he cover probably? I wouldn't want him chasing George Kittle down the field, but
no.
And
we played George Kittle twice, so yeah. I would hesitate. Would you hesitate? Yeah,
I wouldn't. I wouldn't convert him into a safety. I would leave him at linebacker and have him be, the weak side middle linebacker, and try and take advantage of the things he does well, and hope that you can have him put on a little bit of weight to hold up there a little bit better without losing any speed. But he's not a great fit in Seattle. If they were running a 4-3 and he could be your weak side linebacker, your guy in what was KJ Wright's role, I think he could do pretty well. But
I would personally hold out for somebody that was longer and had a little bit more quickness and speed for me. Jeremiah Trotter might be a fine player, but I think in the NFL, when you translate that to the NFL, I don't know if it works out as well as it does in college.
Yeah. So, I mean, the tape's great, but is he the athlete that is going to do things and be a high-end player in the NFL? I don't know. I really don't. And I hope he answers those questions and that they're positive for him, because the tape's great. So, we'll see. And maybe it was just a really bad day for him at the combine, and he's faster than that, and he's more agile than that. We'll see. We'll see.
Okay, let's end it there. We've got safeties and corners to go. I don't think we're not going to do a special teams or a specialist, show, but maybe we will. I don't know. We'll see. And then we're coming up, Keith. It's about a month away, 5 weeks away from the draft, 4 weeks, I think. Mm-hmm. So we'll really kind of hone in on that. We should probably do another mock draft now that the roster is built. Maybe we'll do a roster analysis show, and then do a mock draft, kind of build around that. Strategy may have changed a little bit since the last one we did. So we've got a quarterback on the roster now that maybe is the guy that you look at. Doesn't necessarily press a quarterback into the conversation now anymore, et cetera. So, okay. Anything else?
Nope. I think we're good. Let's get out of here.
Fine. You know where we're at. You know all that good stuff. So thanks for joining us, and look forward to the next show. Again, talking safeties and corners in the next couple of shows. I hope you join us for those. And until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.